Jump Show is back. That means Dan Overall, Jake Price and myself are here once again to preview and review. And lads, I bet you're all very excited. The return of Prestbury Park this weekend. It is the first meeting at Cheltenham of the campaign. And I suppose, Jake, this means that jumps racing is well and truly back.
Come on now, Bully. We've been back for a month. We're 25 days into October.
A true fan, it always starts just before Chepstow. But Dan, look, come on, it is good to have it back at HQ, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the classic stuttered start to the season. We have Chepstow, we get very excited, then we let the flat boys have their one day in the sun finally. And then for some reason, they're still trying to take up this weekend, even though all the horses are going to be wearing armbands, it seems. Like, just let it go. Now, it's our time. We gave you your time. Now's our time.
Right, should we move on to some brass tacks then? Because, look, we're here to talk about the jumps, and the jumps is what shall we talk about? Or what we shall, even if I can get my words in the correct order. Let's have a look at then the last week or so, because we've had I quite like this, actually, the kind of vibe we're going for on this show, where we look back at a performance that we really liked before going into the ones coming up. And Jake and Dan have already alluded to some pretty smart performances they've seen so far this season. Jake, what caught your eye in the last week? A notable performance from you?
Yeah, so there was a 2.5 mile mares chase at Wincanton, which was the race that I was looking at, and particularly the horse who finished second there, called Movidi. Now she's trained by Noel Williams, and I think the night before she was about 2-1, got quite well backed, and then on the day of the race she just drifted all day. She ended up going off 100-30, so a big drifter on the day, which just suggested she needed the run, and that's exactly how she ran. She did get a few of her fences wrong, but it was her first start of her fences, obviously, so I can forgive that. But in the main, I think when she took a fence well, she took it really well, and I think she'll be a good jumper for the season ahead. She got a bit caught out in the end, plenty of time, went and took the race up down the back straight. Quite a smart ride by Michal Nolan, and yeah, she went on and won the race by 2.5 lengths. Movidi, though, finished out her race strongly, definitely will come on for the run, and I thought she jumped really well, especially when she was under pressure. So I would definitely mark up Movidi, and then even presenting a Queen, who was back in third. She was 13 lengths behind Movidi, but she jumped well the whole way round. Chris Gordon's been coming on for their runs as well. So I think she's a horse who can win a race in time. She's been dropped £3 to a mark of 110. I think there could be a handicap in her down the line, but definitely Movidi, a horse who can go on and do big things over fences this season for Noel Williams.
Yeah, caught my eye as well, I have to say, did Movidi last week. Definitely agree with you there, Jake. And Dan, I know you're a big fan of pop music, and your horse is in keeping with that.
I just chose this horse because I knew you'd be able to put a very smooth segue together. And you didn't disappoint. No, yeah, 4 out of 10, Bully, I have to say. It could have been better, but it's the mare show apparently that so far, because my one was Florence the Machine, who ran behind Alfie's Princess at Chepstow a couple of weeks ago. Like, that race just turned into an absolute grueling affair. Obviously, it turned heavy by that stage. Alfie's Princess, I'm glad she delivered on what I thought she's capable of. But Florence the Machine, she's making a rules debut here. She had won a point-to-point. Just really liked the way she went through the race. She kept out of trouble early on, jumped well, got into contention just about, and looked like she may even challenge Alfie's Princess, who made all to win, but just got tired late on. But 2.5 on heavy ground, I think you can excuse that. She's just the type of mare I can see Paul Nicholls getting plenty of wins out of. I don't think she's going to be a grade 1 horse or anything like that, but she's well-related. I think she'll prefer a sounder surface. And she's just the type, the likes of Miranda, Sabrina, and co. I think very much in a mould of that. I think she'll have no problem winning a maiden or a mare's novice hurdle. And then races like the Richard Barber Memorial in a season's time. I can see her rocking up in that in November of 2024 and winning that fairly comfortably. So she'll have plenty of wins in her. And I think she's a nice mare going forward.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. It's the mare show so far, as you say, because I'm going with the mare as well. And my performance of last week, to note, was a winning one. That came from Arclight. A filly, actually. I should say a mare, but she's 4 years old, of course. And she won at Kempton on her seasonal return over 2 miles, 2 furlongs, beating Not Now Linda, who went off favourite eventually for the Skeltons. And what took my eye most about this horse is that she had them all in trouble, I would say, halfway down the back straight, because her jumping was so slick. Like, she was so smooth over those obstacles. And it's rare for one of her inexperience, having her first start over fences. You see one so adept at jumping, and that's exactly what she was. And Rather hilariously, she of course then made an absolutely shocking blunder at the final fence, but it didn't matter because the race is already in safekeeping, and she pretty much put them to the sword on the bridle. And that last fence was just, I think she was just getting a little bit lonely in front. She had to think about things, and she put in an extra stride, and she adjusted well. It was a good sit from Nicker, to be fair, on board. But she looked pretty smart, I would say, earlier in her career. She went to off the ball a little bit towards the end of last season in April. Ascot and Cheltenham were two pretty underwhelming runs, but you couldn't help but like that return. And given that she is very lightly raced, she wouldn't have had, I would imagine she'd been schooling a bit, but not a huge amount. I think there's a huge amount to come from her. So I'd be really keen to see where Arclight goes throughout the course of this season. And I think anyone who watched that would have thought to themselves, that's got to go in a notebook, given the way that she kind of bounded through the race. Right, lads, let's move on to what's to come then, because Friday it's the Cheltenham Prelude meeting, and as usual, Jake and Dan, you've got some factoids for us, some valuable factoids, let's call them. And this time, unlike the weatherman Dan, we're going to go to Jake for an update on the meteorological side of things.
Yeah, Dan's been fired after his exploits at Exeter the other day. So
there was no rain forecast. God, leave me alone. I can't get it right. Hey, well, at least I was right about Chepstow turning soft to heavy. I got that.
Yeah, you did get that one. Yeah,
1 out of 2 is no good, unfortunately.
50% strike rate. Let's see how we get on. Yeah, no, it's good to soft all over at the minute with good in places. There's a couple of bits down the back straight. I'd imagine it would probably just stay that way, to be honest. There's a few showers dotted around, which hopefully will maintain that description. If we don't get the showers, obviously, then a bit more good will creep into that. If we get more showers than we're expecting, then it should just be good to soft all over. So that's what I'm working off. Good to soft is hopefully what we're going to get here.
Yeah, good to soft. Some would say perfect racing ground for the Prelude meeting. Others would say, Real Jump Sound would say not quite soft enough. Dan, an update from you then on the stats. You are a stats man for the week. And I'll tell you what, you were talking to us off air about this earlier in the week, and there are some pretty interesting stats about this meeting.
Yeah, again, we've got a bit more history with this one. So I've gone back to the last 10 seasons, only at the October meeting, minimum of 5 runners. The one, I guess, it probably wouldn't be a massive surprise. I think you nailed it, actually, first time out. The highest strike rate in that time is John McConnell, who in recent seasons has had only a few runners, and he's delivered six wins, not from 19 runners, 32% strike rate. I guess some of the ones that I was a bit surprised was I thought Fergal O'Brien in particular, we know, likes to target this meeting. He's only got a 12% strike rate, but interestingly, he's profitable to back blind because I think he's had a couple of winners like Bonte was 22-1 or reasonably big prices. And I wasn't necessarily sure Paul Nicholls would be that high up in comparison, but he's still got 29% strike rate and still profitable to back blind. So again, it just shows you this time of year, he just knows it. He's got his horses where he wants them to be. And I'm sure we'll probably be covering a few of his as the video comes on. But some of the ones you'd maybe expect also this time of year just aren't up there as you'd expect. Nigel Twiston-Davies just 13%. Dan Skelton's just 8%, which is pretty remarkable, really, given his genuine pedigree at this time of the year. So just a few ones to keep in mind that regardless of where we are this time of year, it just tends to be Paul Nicholls' time.
Yeah, absolutely. The big race on the opening day is the Grade 2 Sky Bet Novices Hurdle, the extended 2 miles. And Jake, starting with you, I mean, we were all, I think, hoping on this podcast, particularly Dan, actually, that Look Away would be good. I can see it rubbing his eyes already. That Look Away would be... Actually, Dan, I've got to come to you. Got to say, we hope Look Away was going for a handicap, but such is life. He's gone for this Grade 2 instead.
So he had 2 entries in 2.5 mile handicaps, one at Cheltenham and then one at Aintree, where he obviously won the Aintree bumper. And they've gone, that rating 122 actually doesn't seem fair to the others. Let's just chuck him in the 2 mile Grade 2. Superb. Neil King has brought the game into disrepute yet again. He even told you, Bully, he's definitely going in a handicap when you were there. He's stitched you up. He stitched me up. And I can't actually have him in this race either. Which is...
You know what, though? This could be a reflection of the ability in which the regard in which Neil King holds this horse. So, he might be thinking, let's land this Grade 2. Let's go forward in the season, get his rating up, get into the Betfair Hurdle, and then that can be the big handicap to win with him. To be fair, when I was looking at this Grade 2, it is worth 50 grand, the race. It's quite valuable.
Yeah, but he's going to finish about 3rd, go up £5-6 and then end up maybe only winning one handicap when he could have had 2 or 3. So, you know,
Yeah.
I just think this is, if 100 mark 122, I think a trainer like Paul Nicholls would have had a handicap, bang ready, win that, and then you can go. It's not like he's a novice till the end of like November. I think he's a novice whole season. It's like he's got time to build up to a grade 2. And I know this isn't a great grade 2, which we'll go into, but it's not even his right trip. I think he's a 2.5 miler. So he's going to be relatively quick. It's Cheltenham. It's not the easiest place to go either. I don't really get it, to be honest.
Yeah, no words from Dan. Jake, can you just touch on the strength of the race then this year?
Yeah, I did want to have a little bit of a rant, to be honest, because obviously, as we mentioned in the season preview, there's been a lot of race changes. The Jumps Pattern Committee has put some changes towards the National Hunt season to try and basically give parity at the Cheltenham Festival, try and make our horses perform better and give us better chances. And I when I saw this change, I didn't really think it would work, and the entry has backed that up. And moving this Supreme trial from the November meeting to this October meeting, I just don't understand why the change has been made. It's just far too early in the season for a grade 2 novice hurdle. If you want to call it a listed novice hurdle or something like that, just to give a bit more intrigue on this Cheltenham card, then fine. But the majority of these horses in this race have had one run in a novice hurdle and are now being chucked into a grade 2. Obviously, Look Away and Infuse have got a bit more experience, but I just don't see how we can call this a grade 2 novice hurdle. Like the class 2 novice hurdle over 2.5 miles earlier on the card has way more strength and depth. There's a lot nicer horses there, a lot more experienced horses there. And I just think that will produce much better winners going forward. I don't see how running basically a Supreme trial 5 months before the Supreme, how is that going to help any single trainer? And the entry really hasn't helped, hasn't backed up their decision. Perhaps, their trainers will realize now that this is an option, and going forward, they might try and target it a bit better. But this season, it really hasn't worked for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just look at the entry list now. It is weak, isn't it? I mean, we're talking. I mean, you could have a couple of horses, Look Away and Cam Cenas in there, possibly ID Wood, who could go on to be decent horses in time. But you think generally that the standard is pretty low. Jake, on that race and on the rest of the card, you got any fancies for Friday?
Yeah, so I mean, in this race, look, there are some nice types, and as you said, they may develop into really good horses. And I may have egg on my face here. I'm not too worried of that, but I do think Willie the Builder is quite good. As you said, Cam Cenas was good as well. Active Authority, he won well from the front of Bangor. Don't really know what any of that form really means. But the one I did have my eye on, I think I've seen the prices now, and he's opened up favourite, which kind of puts me off a little bit. But Toto 2, who comes across for Peter Fahey, over from Ireland, he was a decent bumper horse. He was second to You Ought to Know for Willie Mullins at the Galway Festival, and Willie's come out and kind of bigged him up a little bit in their stable tour. So they do think a bit of that horse. But Toto 2 then won a bumper, came out last month and won his maiden hurdle. And, like the others, it was an effortless success, quite impressive visually, won by 6 lengths, just hands and heels. But he did really quicken up well, and he actually recorded the second quickest time on the card. There was 5 course and distance hurdle races over 2 miles that day. And his was the second fastest, as I say. And he was carrying 11 stone 12, whereas the fastest time was, the winner was only carrying 10 stone 9. So you can kind of mark that up a little bit as well. So he was the one that was on my radar, but if he's favourite, I don't really see how you can say he's value against the rest when they've pretty much all done the same thing.
And Dan, come to you for Friday. Anything you fancy and anything particular in that grade 2?
I say, look, a couple of horses I have an attachment to. I can't go with Look Away. I just don't think 2 miles is going to be his bag. I think there'll be a couple too sharp for him. Active Authority was on my winless ones to watch list. I just thought he jumped deplorably at Bangor, and just his engine got him out of trouble in a weak race. If he jumps like that here, he's got no chance. So we'll have to really sharpen that up. So the one I came down on was Willie the Builder, who Jake alluded to briefly when he discussed the race. I was just really taken by him at Uttoxeter. Showed plenty overnight and a couple of decent bumpers, but just looked a bit clueless. He still looked a bit green at Uttoxeter, but I think he's got a hell of an engine on him. Like, it was a really impressive debut. It's not like the Skeltons are really adverse to running a good type there either. I mean, hurdle debutants of that track for them alone in recent years have been Beakstown, Third Time Lucky, Katira, Favois, Molly Ollie's Wishes. So good horses. They often send a decent one to Uttoxeter. The form isn't going to stand out. You're not going to point to that race in 6 months' time if we're looking at spring festivals, but it's decent enough. The third one, his other 2 starts over hurdles. The second had won 2 bumpers and a novice hurdle during the summer. So they were race fit horses with reasonable form, and he coasted clear so easily. It's a race of a few unknowns, really. A few of these could be fairly decent. They may not be, but I think they've had this race in mind since the start of the season. They alluded to it after they ran him. They wanted to get a run into him before this race. So it seems to be a bit of a long-term plan. I think he was 4-1 on the first opening on a couple of bookies. I think that's fair enough, and I'll be taking a chance on him.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I was quite impressed with him last time as well. Anything else on the card for you, Jake, on Friday?
Elsewhere, there's quite a few that are on my radar. Obviously, we don't have prices as the time of recording, so it makes it a little bit trickier just to say they're a definite bet. But I thought Affadil in the first, he was 6-4 favourite for the 4-year-old handicap hurdle at Chepstow before being pulled out due to the ground. Obviously, the ground's going to be perfect for him here. Freddie Gingle's jumping aboard, taking off £6. As he's a 4-year-old rating against older horses, he gets £1 from them as well. So, yeah, I think he's got a great chance. He'll probably be a round favourite, if not favourite. So it will depend on the price if he's a bet or not. But I think he'll have a good chance. Very similarly, Strictly a Dancer as well in the amateur jockeys handicap chase. I think he'll just have a brilliant chance. He ran a cracker at Chepstow for a long way. I think the commentator even highlighted such a fact. So I'd imagine, again, he'll be towards the front of the market. Price will depend if he's a bet or not, but I think he'll run well. And then finally, Lallygag, who I put up for the Silver Trophy, or was going to put up for the Silver Trophy before the going changed. He obviously ended up being a non-runner on the day, but all the same reasoning as last time applies. Freddie Jingle's riding again, so it takes off £7 because this is not a conditionals race; it's a normal handicap hurdle. And yeah, I just think he'll have a great chance back at Cheltenham. I think the old course will suit him a lot more than the new course.
Excellent. It could be a big day for Freddie Gingle, couldn't it? If it all goes to plan for him. Yeah, absolutely. Before I come to you, Dan, I've got many I really fancy on Friday, but there's one that I thought was very taking on Hurdle's debut for Lucinda Russell, and she runs in the race that Jake alluded to earlier, the 245, which is probably a little bit stronger than the Grade 2 novice hurdle. And the one I like is Elefante, or El Elefante, I should say. She won at Hexham. I know that the strength of those novice hurdles is never particularly high, but she won at head in chest, looks a proper big staying type. I'd be a little bit concerned about her on the ground. I'd want it to be a little bit softer than good to soft. And so hopefully a little bit of rain will come for her. But I think she's a magnificent looking mare, and I'd be very keen on her going forward. She'll make a proper chaser in time for sure, but I think she's got enough ability to strike in a race of this nature over hurdles too. So I keep an eye out for her in the 245. And Dan, come to you for Friday. Anything you fancy in?
Yes, I agree with Jake on a couple. So Affadil, obviously a horse I put up 2 weeks ago for Chepstow, where I think Paul Nicholls took about 5 or 6 out because the ground became heavy. By the time they got to the second day, they're going basically the Old Guard route with him, who they've already compared him to. Old Guard won this race en route to winning the Greatwood Hurdle. I've always thought this is a horse who's going to kick on after his juvenile campaign. Freddie Gingle, obviously in a conditional jockeys race, is a great jockey to have on side, claiming 6. And when they team up in conditional jockeys race, their record is 6 runs, 2 wins, and 3 placed. So I'd expect him to be bang there. And I think we'll get a decent price because the race has held up pretty well. The likes of Black Poppy, I think, is also another Greatwood hopeful, potentially. Strictly a Dancer as well. I'm in agreement there. Obviously won this a couple of years ago. £11 higher than them, but he also kicked on a couple of times after winning this race a couple of seasons ago. He's £1 below his last winning mark. Gina Andrews on board. It's identical prep to when he won it 2 years ago in terms of going to Chepstow. I think he's just got a massive chance. And hopefully Oz Checker's prediction of 50-1 about his price is correct, because I think we'd retire and I'd see you in the Bahamas, but I'd say he's probably more likely to be 5-1 rather than 50s, which is a shame.
Chaps, a lot of agreement there. So, hopefully the brains trust that's come together is going to have a few winners on the board for Friday. On Saturday, we've got plenty to enjoy, some fascinating looking handicaps. Really get your teeth into some of these. And let's start by looking at the 115, shall we, chaps? Jake, this Class 2 handicap chase over 2 miles, and some familiar names going to post for this one, we think.
Yeah, it's an interesting race. Unfortunately, I really fancy Red Rookie, and I don't think he's going to get the rain that he needs. If there was, if I'm going to be sacked as the weatherman, then I'll definitely be taking a chance on Red Rookie if there is, good to soft in places, something like that. But I think he is a horse that really does thrive on softer ground. Obviously, Emma Lavelle's in absolutely flying form at the minute, so you wouldn't have any fitness concerns or anything like that. But yeah, I would have some ground concerns if it's good to soft for him. I think he might get away with that, but as I said, I think he's a better horse on soft. So the horse I actually came down on looking at, towards the betting market of 33 to 1, is a mare trained by Tom Simmons called Royal Margot. And look, she's a mare that's came in from France. She was pretty prolific over there, actually. She recorded 7 wins, and she had a British official rating of 135 when she came over. So that's what, the type of level she achieved. She's now down to a mark of 125. And if you go and look back at her latest 2 starts at the end of the season, she ran at Ascot, where she was 4th behind Black Jerry. And that day she took up the running on the side of the course there, and then into the home straight. She was in the lead, just faded out at the end. And then similarly at Cheltenham, she ran on the Mares Chase day in April, and it was a 2-mile Mares Handicap Chase, and she was 2nd behind Pink Legend. Again, she took up the running. Absolutely, she looked, when she canters and takes offence, she really does go. And then unfortunately, she again just went a bit too soon. Pink Legend came through and showed her stamina. Pink Legend's obviously gone on and won again since at Perth, though. And I just think a mark of 125, which she's been left on, could be exploitable if she can settle a bit better, if they can use her energy at the right time. I think she could end up winning a race like this at some point. Perhaps it will be back in Mare's company, on the next start or something like that. But I think Royal Margot at 33 to 1 would have a chance.
You make a good case, Jake. Are you thinking that Tom Simmons might rely on her rather than Martha Desmond, or possibly run them both? What's your thinking?
That's the other thing, yeah. He does have both runners entered and both jocked up at the minute, so I would only be interested in this one. But yeah, we'll see if she runs or not.
This is hilarious because the one that I like in the race is the other one.
No, I'm not having this. I'm not having both Tom Simmons horses being tipped up in this. What in the name of God is happening?
Look, he's going to get the winner one way or the other, apparently. So,
go on, and Tom, tell me how Marta de Mots wins.
Look, I mean, she'll need to be ready and ready to go off this long break, but she won off a 64-day break when last seen back in February. The ground is going to be perfect for her, provided it stays the way it is. You watch her run behind Dame du Soir in a Mares Chase back in December last year. I mean, she jumped for fun. She loved life around Cheltenham. These are big fences we're talking, but she cruised through the race. And it was just that extra trip that found her out of the 2 miles, 4.5. And she got beaten a neck in the end. Dropping back to 2 miles off bottom weight, she's only £5 higher than what was a pretty emphatic victory at Toxter when last seen. I think she's going to be a massive player back at a track that she runs so well. And she's got that all-important jumping asset, which is so important, particularly, I think, at the beginning of the season. And I've no worries that Tom Simmons is going to have her ready and ready to go for this. So hopefully she can she can win if she goes for the race, and hopefully she will go for the race. But yeah, I can't see Tom Simmons running them both because Ben Post has been jocked up on both of them. So
yeah, I think it'll be one or the other. But
yeah, one or the other, I reckon. Dan, what do you make of all that? Who do you fancy?
To be fair, you both make very interesting cases, and I wouldn't have really explored those routes. So I think there's probably more to this race than maybe first meets the eye. Obviously, I think a lot of people have been hyping up this Haddocks de Zobo as maybe one that ends up in a champion chase. Obviously, the market's kind of forming around him. He was 4th. I think he's already been backed in Ante-Post. I'm not sure. I would be slightly concerned that he tends to come on for a run if you look at a couple of seasons. And also, Gary Moore's jumpers, they just don't tend to be finding, really, at the minute. Like, he had a couple of well-regarded juveniles and novice hurdlers who just haven't gone as maybe was expected. So he could, well, if he's ready for this, it'll be an interesting prospect, but couldn't really be too interested at the prices. Red Rookie, I echo what Jake said. I think he's an interesting horse I've always liked. Whether Cheltenham and ground on the good side of good to soft is what he wants, I'd be surprised. Still think he's got a win off him in him of this kind of mark, but maybe not today. Which kind of led me to before midnight, where obviously I know his move yards from Sam Thomas wouldn't generally be a positive, but I think this is his ultimate aim. And if he doesn't win this, then he's probably not going to win again all season. And sometimes I like giving these horses a chance at an each way price. Like, he had a prep run over hurdles at Chepstow. Obviously, he's been bought by the jockey's dad, Ben Sutton's dad, for him to ride specifically. Ran pretty well over hurdles. He's obviously been a much better chaser. Won this race 2 years ago off 136, now down to 135, plus a £7 claim. He was running okay last season. It wasn't running terribly. And bearing in mind Sam Thomas's yard were just not firing at all. So I think you could make a lot of excuses for that, considering he was running on the best 2 mile chases off marks in the mid to high 140s. This has clearly been a long-term plan, you'd think. Whereas I think with Haddocks de Zobo and Red Rookie, their season isn't going to be defined by what happens here. whereas I think Before Midnight's will be. So we know what his style will be. He'll go from the front. If he's good enough still at 10 years of age, he'll go very, very close. If not, then they might just have to reassess and draw stumps.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dan. I think this is definitely going to be the main target of the season. I like Ben Sutton as a claimer as well. £7.
Yeah.
Not take off. He's a handy little jockey.
Yeah, he's like 19%
really nice
strike
horses.
rate on the rules. Yeah, he's good. He's a point-to-point novice champion a couple of seasons ago. 9% strike rate on the rules. I don't think he's got a winner over the fences yet, but obviously a point-to-point rider, that shouldn't be a problem. So he's not the worst £7 claimer you'll ever see by a million miles.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay, let's move on to the 225, the epic jump season at William Hill Handicap Chase, Class 2 of 3 miles and 1 furlong. Jake, Korak Rambler was entered for this, but is likely to go to Kelso, isn't that right?
Yeah, it sounds like Lucinda's come out today. Obviously, we're recording this just before the deck. So Lucinda's come out and said that he's going to go to the Kelso race rather than this. So obviously, all the weights will be rising accordingly, and everyone should be in the handicap nicely.
Yeah, very much so. And with that in mind, Jake, do you have a fancy in the race?
Yeah. To be honest, me and Dan have had a very long-term shout in this race, which may sound odd. But on Gold Cup Day, we were talking about Lord Accord winning this race. And
I know. We've got serious issues.
Yeah, exactly. we weren't really looking at Galloping des Champs. We were talking about this race, but no. But seriously, he's come back and he ran over hurdles last month. Quite an unassuming handicap hurdle at Warwick. Got outpaced. Absolutely stayed on. You probably couldn't really see much through the main TV screen, but on the head-on, you could see how much ground he made up. Came home really strongly, and I thought that was a perfect prep. I think me and Dan were getting a little bit excited, thinking that he might be a decent price here. The Ante-Post market opens up, and now he's into 7 to 1, and I just think that's a ridiculously short price for the type of horse that we're talking about here. He may well, run really well, but I'm not going to be backing him at 7 to 1. I think that's ridiculously short. I was hoping for a 16 to 1 poke or something like that to have a bit of fun with, but. Yeah, so that's a bit annoying. It seems like everyone's onto the same angle as us. But away from that, I think I just have to give another chance to Am I Right? Obviously, I really fancied him for the Kim Muir. Had good novice form last season. He's the type of horse that really does need good ground. So I don't understand how he managed to go off 11-2 favourite for the Irish National on soft. Like, I don't understand that at all. Something that I would take from it, obviously you end up being pulled up, but something I would take from that, though, is that Connections clearly feel like he can win a race like this at some point. But 3 miles, 1 furlong, good ground at Cheltenham, I think that is absolutely optimum conditions. I'd imagine Rachel will come over to take the ride. And for Michael 142, I just think Am I Right is going to have a race in him at some point, and this looks weak enough to have a go at.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with the thoughts on Am I Right, Jake. And to be honest, I do agree with Lord Accord and Dan as well. I think this is the plan. This is going to be the race. He won it last year. He's only a pound higher. So, Dan, I think you fancy him too then.
Well, I did. I think last year's race was a lot weaker than this one might be. Obviously, we don't know the final deck, but on entry stage, I was kind of like, oh my, okay, this is a much better race than it was 12 months ago. And obviously, he's going to be one who wants all rain to be avoided. He needs it as quick as possible. He needs it good, really. Good to soft even is not going to see him to absolute best effect. I mean, he was 14 to 1 when it opened up, the Ante-Post, but the snipers were out quickly for that, and he's obviously now 7. So, like, at 7s, I'll leave him alone, and I don't think he's going to get any shorter if the entries hold up. So he's one I'm happy to leave for the meantime, although it will pay me if I somehow we managed to have a 7-month plan for a horse and not backed him. That'll be a painful one to take, but I mean, I'm still get sore over I right, so this game is all about pain. So we'll take some more. So the one I came down on, I think it's an ambitious shout, but I think it'll be a massive price. He's 16 to 1 currently. I think he'll be bigger on the day if the entries hold up as I think they will, and that's Wayfinder for Rebecca Curtis. Go back to this time last year, this was a staying chaser, massively on the upgrade. He was a big fancy for the Welsh National Ante-Post. He bolted up at Chepstow off mark 122, got a £10 rise for that. Went off favourite for a Grand National trial, the Welsh Grand National trial. He did bleed after that, which has been a bit of an issue with him recently. Has happened a couple of times, but it does at least give a viable excuse for a couple of below par efforts. Ran well at Uttoxeter on his penultimate start. That race has worked out pretty well. And interestingly, Rebecca Curtis is 4 from 13 at this meeting. She's got the second highest strike rate of any trainer with more than 5 runners in the last 10 years, including Relentless Dreamer, who won this race back in 2018. this is Wayfinder's time of year. He's won in October every season, but the only exception was when he didn't make his reappearance until December. Like this, he goes well fresh. He likes a ground that's good to soft. He doesn't want it too heavy. Ben Jones is currently jocked up, and he's 3 from 5 when riding him. He's always ridden handily, which suits the style of this race and suits the chase track at Cheltenham on the old course. I'd like to see a change of headgear. That would really get me excited. He's wore cheek pieces first time out last season, wore them all the way through the season. If blinkers go on or something like that, I think we've really got a live one. I think there's a good race in him at some stage. And if he's geared for this, which I hope he might be, because he was entered in the amateur jockeys race as well. But this is a bigger part. So if they're really going to go for a race, they could well have him ready here, and he'll be a big old price as well.
Yeah, I like the sound of that, Dan. I have to say, yeah, Wayfinder. And one of those proper kind of stayers, isn't he, Rebecca Curtis likes. I'm not a massive fan of what I'm going to put up, but I think he's worth a second look for sure. He wouldn't, because he's so unreliable. He's Mr. Unreliable. But there's so much ability when it all drops right. And that is Rapper for Henry Daly. He bolted up at Cheltenham in January. He really won very easily in first-time cheap pieces. And is only £3 higher than for that 8.5 length victory now. So, if weights and measures are to be believed, then Rapper's really, really nicely treated. However, he is, as I say, very erratic. And 2 starts after that didn't promise a huge amount. One of them, admittedly, did come in the Kim Muir. So that was a lot tougher race than this will be. And a first-time visor, I don't think really worked that day. But he's difficult because he clearly needs some stoking up. He needs something to get him going. That first time cheap pieces were used, they were quickly got rid of, even though they worked. So obviously, he's not the easiest to deal with. I'm expecting some kind of other newfangled headgear combination to be introduced on Saturday. Maybe like an eye shield or a tongue tie with a cheek piece. I don't know, something kind of a bit weird. Maybe that will help him out because clearly he needs a bit of stoking. So hopefully, if they get it right, I think we're looking at a really well handicapped horse and one who obviously runs Cheltenham really well when he's on song. So he's around about 20-1, and I can see, I think that's a decent each way price, to be honest. Right, the last handicap on Saturday of note is the Pertemps Network Qualifier. And I mean, I looked at this race. I thought it was impossible. They always are, though. A, at this time of year, and B, a Pertemps Qualifier. I mean, they're hardly ever easy to work out, are they? Dan, start with you for this one first. Hopefully you've got more of an idea who's going to win than I do.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to that time, aren't we, where obviously a few Irish entries are relative interesting. Obviously, Noel Mead's horse has got a race like this in him at the top there, top of the market, understandably. But yeah, just kind of a lot of fishing for marks really going on. But there aren't as many Pertemps qualifiers over in Ireland, so they tend to come over for one. Like this can't be a race we've got a strong bet. If you do, then you're a braver man than I. But the one I did like, just because I thought he might be a horse to keep on side this season, is Off to a Flyer of Joe Tizard's. He was a bit of a slow burner last year, but they always thought a bit of him. And he started to show towards the back end of last season that they were right, that he has got some decent ability in him. Only narrowly beaten by the Carpenter over 2 mile 2 last season. He's won all 3 starts, rate 134. He was pulled up in the EVF final, but you can put a line through that. It's ground he just didn't like. And then he was up to 3 miles for the first time at the end of last season at Ayr. Saw it out really well. Beat Aramax that day, which people may think, beating Aramax, whatever. But he went on to win his next 2. And I think he actually beat a trying Aramax that day, which is no mean feat because he'd come down to a handy mark. Quick Draw was in 3rd. He's gone on to win over Fences the early part of this season. So I think that's reasonable form. Only got up £7 to a mark of 120. So he's in that zone where I think they may be planning to go chasing with him down the season. But if they want this as an option later on, say chasing doesn't go to plan and they want to run at Cheltenham, he's going to need to win really to get into the final. So I like that kind of angle with these qualifiers, something that kind of has an incentive to go very close. I think he's one of those horses, completely unexposed, still at 3 miles on good ground. I'd be surprised if he can't win another race of some kind off 120, whether it's now or later in the season.
Okay, really interesting stuff. Keep an eye out for that one over the course of the season, for sure. And Jake, that's 3 o'clock. What about you? Who do you fancy in that?
Yeah, well, myself and Dan have spoken about most races beforehand, just to see what we each other fancy and give each other some ideas. But we hadn't spoken about this race at all, and I actually really like Off to the Flyer as well.
That is a rare occurrence. There's a lot of agreement this week. We're either going to be in the Bahamas or on the street. But I'll see you there, either way.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything more I can really add. I definitely think he was up against a trying Aramax who got well supported on the day, narrowly touched off, and as we saw, went on and won his next 2 starts. And yeah, I just don't think they're really going to care about like not winning this. Like they're off a mark of 120. He needs 8 to come out. I assume that'll be absolutely fine. And like if they win it, they'll just be trying to win it. I don't see a world where they're not going to, try and, piss around to try and get 4th or anything like that. They're going to be trying to win the race. If they win it, they win it. If they don't, they'll go over the fences. I'd imagine is probably what they're thinking. So yeah, I think he's got a great chance. 3 miles, good ground, or decent enough ground will be absolutely perfect for him. Yeah, not really too much to add. The only other horse I did have a little bit of an interest in was Gort Millish for Gordon Elliott, off a rating of 123, but I think he's going to be going for the Novice Hurdle on the same day. I think it's the next race afterwards, actually. So if he turned up, I'd have an interest in him because he's got a decent mark. Again, would be a horse that would probably need to win to get into the Pertemps final, which is, as Dan said, the best angle you can have approaching these races. Yeah, but off to a flyer is definitely the bet. I think it was 16 to 1 or 14 to 1 across the board, so decent price.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed for you both there, lads. I wouldn't have the strongest opinion again on this race, apart from the fact that I do think the favourite, or likely favourite, Bugs Moran, will be there or thereabouts. I think he'll be hard to beat, actually, if you know me. It sounds as though the plan's going to come, but going to be to come for this race. And I think that the angle with him really, both the fact that I think there's definitely a win or 2 within him off his current mark. I think he'd be better than an English mark of 136 in time. He's still fairly likely racing handicap hurdles. But I think that the main angle with him is that he's still very unexposed over 3 miles and further. His recent 2 seconds in really competitive handicaps, one was a listed race at Galway, have been over shorter, 2 miles 6.5, then 2 miles and a half. And the one time he's run in a handicap hurdle over 3 miles so far in his career, it was at Fairyhouse back in April of last year, and he beat Eric Bloodaxe by a length and 3/4. So he's obviously got stamina to burn. I think he's probably going to be seen to a better light up to 3 miles. So I think he will be pretty hard to beat in this race. Right. What about other bets on Saturday? Because it's a big day of action. We should mention the 410 as a race itself because it's full of horses with progressive profiles, exciting novice chases. It is a novice chase over the extended 3 miles. Giovinco going to Carlisle, I'm reliably informed by both of you. But the entry stage, the race looks really hot. Broadway Boy, Outlaw Peter, Flooring Porter, Hometown Boy, Iroko, and We've All Been Caught, and Apple Away are all entered. And Dan, what about other bets on Saturday?
Yeah, just one I'd mention, and in the Masterson, which is obviously, well, by anyone's recollection, probably the worst renewal we've seen in many a year. I couldn't be touching Blue King Daru, even though I know he's clear on official ratings. Obviously, he blew up at the track previously, and he's even money. That would be a no-go for me. I think the one who's interesting, I think it's 12 to 1 as well, is Bois Gilbert. Obviously, will be coming in race fit, won at Kelso in what I thought was a decent race. Bit likes of Autumn Return, who's a very consistent, reliable mare. Had Brian Hughes on her, who was 100% on her until that day, and did that really well. That was hands and heels only, except for after the last, where it looked like Autumn Return was getting back up, but he extended away quickly after being asked for a bit more. He's going to turn up race fit. Obviously, he's got £17 to find on official ratings of Blue King Daru. I don't think there's that much in it. And I'd say if that he's still that kind of price on the day, then I will be having a little play on Bois Gilbert.
Good stuff, lads. That's Saturday done and dusted. Just the one race to talk about on Sunday, but it is a prestigious and important contest and has a fine roll of honour in the past. That is the Old Roan Chase at Aintree. And this year looks very competitive, as it always is. Dan, start with you again on the Old Roan. And I've got to say, it's a race that I've always enjoyed watching ever since I was a boy.
Yeah, it's generally a good start for a lot of these horses that go on to better things, whether that be over 2.5 miles, you're looking at likes of the Paddy Power or even the Hennessy. So it tends to have a say throughout the season, and you tend to see some of the horses who did really well last season making a reappearance. It's always an informative contest. We don't have any prices yet, as I'm aware, so it makes it a bit difficult. But the one I like with this race in mind is That's All Right, Gino. He's very productive last season. Only 2 wins from 8 starts, but generally just kept improving. The only concern with him I'd have is if it does get heavy, and there is a bit of rain forecast. I think it's soft currently at Aintree. So if it goes soft to heavy, I'd be a bit concerned. But if it was on the quick side, I think we're looking at a horse still on the upgrade. I think he's still got a race in him off that kind of mark. does have a habit of not winning as much as he perhaps should, but I think towards the back end of last season in particular, he was really getting his act together. He does go well fresh too, and I think this would have been a target for a long way out. So if it's good, if it's on the good side of soft, that's a right Gino would be my play.
Yeah, nice. I obviously went to Jamie Stone's. If you didn't know, anyone watching at home, I mentioned it once.
Did you? None the wiser. How's Roger Pole got on?
Oh, yeah. Not too much champagne in the winner's enclosure for that one. Yeah, no, just on that one, Dan, actually. I mean, Jamie was of the opinion that he was going to go for the Old Roan and then the Paddy Power. So they want to kind of go that way with him. Do you think, just interested to know really what your thoughts are on him, in terms of the fact that you think he could win this, go up in the weights, and then have a chance to win the Paddy Power too? Or do you think maybe one of the two is going to be enough?
Well, if he can win both, then he'll be a Ryanair horse or going for those grade. I don't know if he's that level. I think he could win a big handicap off this kind of mark. Again, you're going back to what's the main aim? I think it would be bold of them not to have him right here, because I'd say a lot more people have the Paddy Power as a long-term aim than this race. I think a couple will have this as just kind of a season opener. And he's that kind of young progressive horse who could take this, go up 5 or 6, and then still run okay in a race like the Paddy Power. So I'd hope they'd have him fit. But as you say, you're never really too sure, and you can't be too sure.
Yeah, you absolutely can't be. Jake, before I come to you on the race, I'm going to give my 2 cents worth and see what you think about my selection in this, because I think this is a horse who's yet to reach his full ability, and that is Do Your Job. Used to be with Michael Scudamore and now goes to Lucinda Russell. First time up for her, and she's been in really good form in recent weeks. And this is a horse I think most of us were aware of around about kind of end of the season 2022, because he won a race at Newcastle, and then he won really easily in the Future Champions Novice Chase, beating Melodrama 5 lengths, and was sent off favourite to do so. And then perhaps more interestingly, he then went to Aintree last year, I'm sure plenty of you remember, and went off favourite for this exact race and didn't perform in that, and then didn't perform again 2 starts since then. So my angle really is the fact that he's now down to 142, which is a mark off which he is more than capable of winning, a really nice low weight, and the change in scenery. I think Lucinda Russell, given her current vein of form, and the job that she generally does with chases, is a pretty remarkable one. There's no doubt he's well treated. Jake, I don't know what you think of that. And I know he's come back from a 329-day break, and it takes a lot on trust, but you got to say he's nicely handicapped at his best.
Yeah, I just think he might need the run. That would be my concern with him.
Yeah.
If you knew he was bang on ready for this, then yeah, absolutely fair enough. But yeah, I do think he'll come on for it. Lucinda likes to, take them slowly, doesn't she, and build them up. So that would be my only concern. Yeah, looking at the race as a whole, then That's Right Gino was definitely towards the 4 on my list. He's been a bit unlucky already this season because he was a non-runner at Chepstow when he was supposed to run there because of the heavy ground. Then he was supposed to run last weekend in the Prelude Handicap Chase up at Market Raisin, and that got abandoned. So this is kind of like the third choice that they've ended up coming here. If you knew that he was coming here to win the race, I would be backing him, because Hitman's making the weights. He's top weight off 159 or 158, which makes That's Right Gino's mark of 149 look okay, and you only have to carry 11 stone free. So I'd be happy with that. But I do think that the Paddy Power Gold Cup is the race that they're aiming him for, to be honest. So there's only 34 entries in for that this week, and it doesn't look the strongest renewal on paper. So yeah, that would be my main concern with him. But away from that, there wasn't a standout bet at the prices. Obviously, we don't have the prices to look at it, but there wasn't a standout bet for me. Thought Jetoile was interesting, but he's up quite a bit from his last win. And then Melodrama is another horse who I thought he ran really well behind Pete Dory at Aintree. And I think the only thing with him is that Donald McCain is in pretty awful form at the minute. He's had a winner the other day just to stop the rot, but yeah, that would be something that goes against him. But it's a very interesting race. I'll be definitely keeping an eye on it. And the horses that finish in second, third place, they're definitely horses to look at for the Paddy Power Gold Cup, because obviously we had Galore do the exact same thing last year.
Right, that brings us to the end of the show today. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And do comment with your biggest fancy for Cheltenham this weekend, or indeed for the weekend as a whole, and whether or not you agree with the team, because there has been plenty of concord this week between Jake and Dan, and hopefully some winners in there as well, lads. Because Dan, I can't remember the last time you've agreed so much. So that's only got to be a good sign, surely.
Yeah, sure. I think Jake's in better form than I am, so it's only going to go one way. He's either going to bring me up or I'm going to drag him down. So I guess we'll see.
Well, do you know what? If I ever agreed with Jake, I'd be absolutely delighted because it means usually I'm onto a good thing, I would say, Jake.
You were so close with that mare in the opening handicap chase, but
I was. And same colours as well. Same trainer, same colours, and even the same jockey has been jocked up. Gents, thanks so much, and thank you all for watching as well. Until next time here on the Junk Show, it's goodbye.